Let's do this then. I don't talk very much, so I apologise if I'm a disaster. And let me go back to the first slide. I don't really have anything inspiring to say. I drink a lot and I'm very overweight, and I should really do something about that. What I'll do though is start my clock. If someone can shout me about 10 minutes in, it'll be great. I'll try and speed up a little bit. We have a little WhatsApp group. If anyone wants to join it, give me a shout and come in and join it. So we don't want to share that online, so come in. But one of the things that come out was that everyone's talking about PWA now, and being the first speaker, I feel obliged to tell you that my talk actually has it in the title, and I can talk about it, and none of the rest of you can. So. So there's that. I'm also sandwiched between, Philip, Matt, and I think Vinay is talking straight after me. So I was like, Jesus, what can I do about that? So I got some Kool-Aid to drink. So cheers. And then I just want to tell you that actually it's not about PWA, and I apologise for the fact it's in the title. And it's not really about Magento. So sorry about that. And then I thought, I wasn't actually going to put this slide in. I'd just be good to understand who knows who I am, or actually who doesn't know who I am, because I don't really want to give the backstory. Not many. Okay, that saves some time. I went to Croatia, and I felt afterwards I was kind of arrogant. I asked that question, and about half the audience put their hands up, and I was like, shit, I didn't put any of that in my slide. But what I just want to say, and I don't say this for me, I say this for women in tech, there's often a perception that we don't code. This is me, not the company, as somebody in Croatia said. This is actually my GitHub commits. I've been coding now for over 35 years, over 20 professionally, and I actually started my career just around the corner, Oxford Road. So from the National Computing Centre. So this is probably going to be one of my last technical talks, so it's quite apt that it's back where I began my career in 1996. So the backstory, on the right-hand side is an advert, and you'll see that all the way through the slides, also at the bottom. I kind of need to start by telling you, what is a Magento extension, right? So I'm going to talk to you today about how we re-engineered our extensions. It's quite technical. I hope I don't lose you. If I do lose you, tough, come and talk to me afterwards. If it's too, high level for you, I apologise now. But what I think makes up an extension is these 6 components. You have the configuration, so your system XML. You have the back-end logic. Obviously, there's a lot of interaction with the database. And then we have the admin side. So for us, that's around the order view, so we're dealing with the HTML and stuff around that. And then there's obviously the front-end components. For ShipperHQ, that's predominantly around the checkout. I actually know nothing else about Magento apart from in shipping, so I'll struggle if anyone raises questions there. And then there's sometimes a library or API that connects to a web service or some external thing like geocoding or something like that. So this was web shop apps, and this is where we really started. And I draw it quite simply. I like to do things simply. So hopefully this all makes sense to people, but web shop apps is fully embedded, like it's on-premise, you sell the extension. And we did that for a number of years, and it was really, really difficult. We found it very brittle. We ended up with a shed load of code. We had problems with IP, as many as you know from Twitter and me kind of raging. And it was non-scalable. Every month you reset and you sold extensions. It just didn't work for us. So we moved on from this. And I thought we were building something that was brilliant. That's the problem, right, with extensions. It didn't matter how well we did. We were building on shaky foundations, and we saw this coming with Magento too. And actually, even in 2010, we saw this coming. And by 2012, you probably won't know this because we kept selling them to you, but we actually put all our extensions into support and maintenance, sorry about that, and stopped innovating on them to build ShipperHQ. I think some of you still buy them now, so I'm really sorry about that. They're only 6 years old, don't worry about it. So that's kind of where we were. They work very well, they're good extensions. So, but I knew that we had to solve this, and a guy said to me at Reuters once that I was I don't complain much, as you know, and I was complaining to this guy at Reuters when I used to work there, and he turned around to me. He was some really old guy, like in his, I don't know, 51 or something. No, at the time I thought he was old. And he turned around to me and he said, well, why don't you do something about it? He was like, stop complaining and take control yourself. And I think that was one of the best lessons that I learned in the 10 years at that company. And I'm constantly reminded of that, especially given that I have a bit of a tendency to complain sometimes. So phase 2 was ShipperHQ, which I thought was utopia. So we started building ShipperHQ, we built it for M1, and then we built it for M2. So we basically moved out the dashboard. So a lot of configuration was not in the system XML. We brought together all our extensions, and we created a web service. Hopefully everybody understands this. If you don't, you should probably leave now. Then what we found was that on Magento 2, we were spending a lot of time on development. So we still had this massive extension, and some of you may know Genevieve that works for me. She was responsible for the ShipperHQ extension, and she was working on this for 2 years. I'm like, what are you doing? You're not very good? What are you doing with this extension? And there was still, so even though we'd moved all this business logic off, which for us made sense, as a company it made sense. I'm sorry it's not open source, sorry Matt, but for us it made sense to move it off. But we still had this really large extension, so we started thinking about this, and the other problem with it was that we were still very dependent on what Magento was doing. So we wasn't fully in control of our destiny. And what we found was on the server side that actually we could really move forward fast on server functionality. On the client side, we were really struggling. And we were also struggling around the API side in serving up this data. So we put all this data inside Magento, and then we couldn't serve it up for the post-order systems to use it, like the WMSs, like ShipStation and people like that. So this was phase 2. So we done well, right? Like we got configuration, we did a library, and we removed a fair chunk of the back-end logic out and took control of it. But we still had problems in the database, the admin, and front end. So yeah, I took my own advice, and we started thinking about, what are we doing? I'm not a front-end developer, I'm a back-end developer. So it took me a while to figure this out. And I just want to explain how we iterated over it, right? I come at programming and development from a kind of I know nothing perception all the time, and part of that's because I've got a really bad memory, so I can't retain sort of the logic sometimes, or the interest. I can't say that word. You know what I mean? The little bits. I can't. I'm not a specialist. I'm not a theorist. I worry about solutions. So that's how I come at development. So I started thinking about this, and we decided to go down, and I'll explain later why that is. The React route. So we basically, looked around at everything. It took a while, and we decided to go down the React route. So then we looked at, well, what's the best way to start jumping into this? And I think in light of many of you saw Twitter last week, and Anton and Ben Marks talking about the deprecation of Knockout.js, well, we kind of were aware of this when they made the announcement. I think it was June 17, but we'd already decided to do this before then because of our own reasons. So we built order views. So the basic idea of this is that you're in the ShipperHQ, not the ShipperHQ admin, I mean it'd be lovely if it was, the Magento admin, and you then want to see the extra shipping information. So we built what we call order view, which allows you to see that information. So it gave us really two things. One was to take out the database aspect of it. So now we're storing the shipping information from the order locally. So an example of this would be, what day do you want to dispatch it on for a calendar kind of scenario? So that's a simple thing. And then we used React and GraphQL to do this. And it was all new technology to us. And what we... the way that we approached it, I think, was interesting, because we come at it from the perspective of we had no idea what we were doing. We kind of thought about it for quite a while, and then we jumped in and we did it. And it's interesting that the infrastructure gets a lot more, and there's another diagram after which is much worse than this, but the infrastructure gets more difficult underneath. It's like the foundations, right? So we basically changed around how things were talking. So instead of the extension just talking REST to the web service, we directed it to go GraphQL to our order view server. And this really created a quote. So if you think of the Magento stuff, a quotes and orders table, and then we pushed it up and we can render back from the CDN back into Magento. I should draw a line there, really. So that's basically it. So this did this for us. So we now have configuration admin, and we're starting to go orange on backend storage. You know, the admin components was a big one there. I hope this is vaguely interesting. It gets better, trust me. And then we did phase 4. So phase 4, and I think this is the thing, like we hated developing on the Magento 2 front end. We just did not enjoy it. And we wanted to take control of that. It was very cumbersome for us. So phase 4 was us taking over the checkout, and we wanted the flexibility. We always used to think that SIs would pretty up what we were doing on the back end and make that look very sexy, and then we realised that actually they're too busy and they don't do that and it looks a disaster. So this was something that we needed to do as well to help SIs, and obviously they're really busy, as you all know. So we took this over as well, and my kind of feeling on it from a technical perspective was where I was trying to get to was, let's have a really, really thin Magento extension. Any code that doesn't need to be in there should not be in there. And I kind of think of things like live chat where you just insert some JavaScript. And that's kind of where I was trying to get to, right? And this allows us to do things like bug fixes without actually redistributing the extension, add enhancements, introduce bugs as well, incidentally, to the system. You know, there's a lot that's going on there. It doesn't come without its problems, right? As you can see, wrong one. Go back. Well, that's what happened. Go back. There you go. This is a bit blurry up here. Sorry about that. It gets a lot more complicated. And I'll go through a couple of bits on this so you can understand a bit more about the GraphQL side. But basically, what the extension now doesn't talk REST to the web service. It's not happening. And this allows us to do a number of things, really. We can do a lot more around asynchronous side because we can delay what's coming back. So we pass very basic information back now to Magento. So we just renders the rates. And then separately to that, we're actually then rendering up the React is bringing back all the calendar information, the pickup information, and all that can happen asynchronously. And for us, this is where we see PWA. I put that in quotes, I'll come back to that. But we see that coming in and the ability to be able to do things slightly differently there. But I think what I want to get across from this is not, you know, ignore what it is, right? I'm expecting to understand ShipperHQ. But I think it's about taking something, deciding on what you want to achieve, and then finding a route to get there, and doing that in a way that's incremental. Like, none of this happened overnight. We did develop it quite rapidly. All the view that we built was built in around about 3 days from zero. And this was built, man hours, probably about 2 months. We've still got a bit of work on the DevOps side. There you go. So that's I'm happy, right? Like, as an owner of a company, and from a technical perspective, as a tech architect of the company, I'm very happy now. I feel like we've took back control. And what this has made us is actually happier with Magento, because we are now less reliant on what they're doing. If they want to, you know, we put this in Magento 2, if they rip out and put in PWA Studio, we can insert into that. It's not an issue for us. And it allows us to run much faster. And I think, like, I would encourage you all to decouple your code as much as possible wherever you can do it. And to look at it and really stand back, and you have to take time to do that. So what did we learn? My kind of pair worker in life, I've actually known her for about 15 years, is Genevieve. We learned that, she's there on the left, she actually told me not to put this picture up because she thinks she looks a disaster. I'm like, look at the picture on the right, girl. So we ended up, like, it's interesting, like, how do you approach this kind of development? And we just did it. We literally just did it. So it was on the Friday, we sat down, we actually went to Australia and sat together because she lives in Australia, and we sat together and we had another couple of junior engineers and we went through the tutorials. We put everybody on the same level, went through the tutorials. Come Monday, we were like, right now, let's build. Right? And that's how we worked on it. What we found that sometimes working remotely was really difficult, so that's why I ended up in Asia. At the Asia events was actually, well, I didn't really want to go, but I didn't want to go. But like the reason I was there was actually to code the checkout part, and we just went hammer and tong at it, and I think I really pissed her off, to be honest, because we were getting on a plane, and I'm like, no, you can't just sit here. Like, we have to work. And I actually made her work all the way up to the gate, like actually past the gate, which is why I'm carrying my laptop. So she was quite happy to get away and was very pleased that she works remote from me. So yeah, jump straight in. So if you're getting into GraphQL, like look, queries, mutations, subscriptions, right? Like that's it, right? Like it's not that difficult. It's a beautiful syntax. I really enjoy it. I would highly recommend that you go and have a look at it. So there's these tutorials, and I'll tweet these later on. The How to GraphQL is brilliant. So it walks you through using React. You're using Apollo and Prism, which I'll cover in a second. But basically, there's a whole load of stuff there. And then Ben posted a tweet yesterday, which you can probably find online, which is a free GraphQL book. And I had a look through the topics, and it looks fantastic. We didn't try to understand too much. Like, we didn't understand subscriptions to start with. We just did queries and mutations, right? One's a query and the other one updates. It's pretty damn simple. And then we learned the SDL syntax, which is basically YAML, right? Like, it's not that difficult. But it's like, don't worry about what you don't know. I always say this to my developers, the junior guys, like just it's a puzzle and you don't have all the pieces, and that's okay. Be comfortable with that being okay. But it's important that you kind of jump straight in. And I use a lot of boilerplate code, so I'll take code online, especially given I'm not a front-end person. When we first did the order view, we just took React boilerplate code and we started adapting it, right, like, and changing it. And what we find is that that's a very quick way to get something running. It gives you that kind of kick of, success, and you don't give up. And then you find that, like, 2 weeks later, this code is an absolute disaster and I need to rewrite it. But you didn't know that at the start, right? And I think, like, sometimes people put, hey, you always want to write perfect code. Well, good luck with that. But I'm kind of more of an iterative person around this, right? Don't worry about writing perfect code. Just write code is what I would say. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with junior engineers is it's like they worry about what they don't know. And then also find a quiet space. I mean, the whole reason we built ShipperHQ, the reason, it would never have happened if I did not move to the US and split the company in two. You have to find space to develop. And if you haven't got that quiet space, ask your manager to provide it for you, because it's essential to get. Doesn't mean you cannot be part of a team. So my developers sit on the main floor, but they also have a separate development room that they can go to for quiet time. And I just think that's really important. All right, got to speed up. Okay, so don't jump straight in. So I contradict myself. I'm very good at that. You'll see that online a lot. I thought about this from an architecture perspective for quite some time, right? So once we decided to do, then we jumped straight in. Before that, there was a heck of a lot of evaluation. And we actually decided on the Node, React, GraphQL stack before Magento did. So it was really reassuring when they picked a similar stack. But you do really have to put the groundwork in. But once you get into development, it's like that thing about not coding until you have to code. So work all this stuff out, whether that's by design or in your head. I mean, for us, luckily, we all know each other enough that we can share ideas on sick bags. So that works quite well. GraphQL, what do I like about it? The biggest thing I like over JSON is the fact that there's a defined schema. I was always a fan of SOAP in terms of the WSDL, never a fan of SOAP in terms of the syntax or the verboseness of it. And I think that this provides a happy medium. The fact that we can just put this up, we actually have a playground in ShipperHQ you can go to, and it's a self-describing schema. We always had trouble with API documentation. I think the tool sets will move towards auto-creation for GraphQL. So similar to what you see in stuff like like C# web services creating off of a WSDL file. I think we're going to see a lot of that coming into play. I really like the fact that there's stricter data types around it. I'm a Java background, so to me that really appeals that we can be more explicit in what this is instead of just saying a field. And it's got a massive community following, and I've been encouraging Magento to try to stay within the constraints of what GraphQL is and their own thing, so that we can use this across the board and there isn't anything bespoke there. And I think one of the biggest moves they did was that they actually tried to layer XML on top of it, and they changed that around to use SDL now, which I think is great, because I actually think GraphQL accelerate much quicker than Magento can accelerate GraphQL. So challenges and opportunities. I can talk to people about this afterwards, but without going into too much detail, like we had a lot of stuff going around the asynchronous side, where we basically were calling out to get a quote, and then we had to render up this calendar. And we wanted the Java web service to take its time. Like sometimes it does calls to UPS and FedEx, and it can be a little bit slower there. And we kind of realised that we could kind of work with that in the rendering side. So we ended up using subscriptions that wait for the data to come back. And that was not something that we considered at the time. But I think there's a lot to be done there around that. And we see that as being a way, for instance, if you take something like a calendar where we could go, all right, well, now we can actually pre-populate the dates in anticipation of them selecting one. But I see that as being a win for people that are working on Magento right now with PHP. Schema stitching was an issue for us, so this is basically where we were having to rip apart what was being returned and push it back together, and we had a lot of work around that, and GraphQL does support. On the ACL side, we found issues around what we was actually exposing publicly, and that's why you see two servers there. The order manager servers in our private network, and we don't expose that schema publicly. So we're starting to move more to a microservice environment, and I share that because I think it was something we never considered at the start. The nice thing about it is if you take multiple frameworks, what we did was just create adapters for each one. So we have a DLT one, we have an M2 one, and we have other ones. Okay, PWA, I got to stop soon, I know. Just get Lighthouse. I kind of read a lot about it, and everyone comes back to that. But look, so I think, like, I'm a standards person. It's confusing what PWA is to me, right? And I like clarity. I'm like, if it's confusing to me, it probably means I should ignore it. So currently, we've built ours without PWA in it. We could put some PWA in, we will. But for our first iteration, we've not done it. And I would encourage you all, when something is so confusing and you don't really understand why you should use it, you should probably not use it right now, because it will become clear why. And we're starting to see that, but I think it's interesting that we're not getting worked up over the fact that we're not PWA. And I think in the checkout, it's a lot more difficult to do anyway. I mean, I don't see offline come into the checkout. I know somebody says they've done it, but that's bollocks. But anyway, so I looked at the standards, and this is basically what it is. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are doing this stuff anyway. And then I was like, well, how do I, look at stuff? And I always try to visualize things as a developer. I'm a very visual person. I see the machine kind of thing. So I just wanted to describe what I think service workers are, because everyone tries to make this so complicated, and really it's not. It's about bees and caching. It's as simple as that. I mean, the idea behind the service workers is they're worker bees, right? They're working in the background, and they're basically, getting this stuff in an asynchronous fashion and caching it, right? And then feeding it back to you. That's it. That's service workers. So if anybody tries to tell you a load of rubbish around this, just cut them off and say, I know what they are, bees and caching. React.js, I can't even talk about it. I know a little bit about it, but the developers love it and the designers love it. So for those of you that see all this stuff coming from Magento, I would encourage you to use it and play with it. We find it works very well with our front-end designers that just know CSS, HTML, and then our kind of front-end developers. They seem to be able to work well on it. The other interesting technologies that we have going on is Prism, which I'd encourage Magento just to switch to, but they probably won't. Which we use for our database on the order view side. It's bloody fantastic, and it works very well. I mean, it's for GraphQL, so you create a schema in Prisma, and then you just inherit that inside your GraphQL schema and add onto it as required. It's brilliant, and I like the fact that it abstracts away the database interactions for us and deals with all of that. It's still a maturing technology. We've decided to go with it, and we'll see how it plays out. But I like anything that reduces the need for us to code. And then the other thing we're doing, which is actually why we're not using service workers, is we're using Apollo with GraphQL, which is really just, like a helper library thing. Yeah, it does some stuff around caching and things like that we like. So we're struggling at the moment to see where PWA is going to give additional benefit for us, so we're ignoring it. So why am I excited? I believe the days of the monolith are gone, and thank God. I think we all need to break up our code base. We need to decouple. We need to move Magento and ourselves to open standards and technologies, which I think will make it much more interesting for developers. And I believe much more collaborative for us that are working across the ecosystem, but maybe in slightly different parts, right? I'm not the same as USIs, but there's a lot of crossover here. So that's that. Thanks very much.